Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sara Lihz and I'm so excited to share these projects with you today. We're going to make 2 box cards that fold flat and fit in an envelope, but when you take them out, they sit on display beautifully and are wonderful keepsakes for our favorite people. So we're going to start with the baby card, then we'll move on to a Father's Day card, but know that you can do this with any of your favorite dies. So here's the first card, right? Folds flat and then it just pops up on the back. Congratulations on your little miracle. And I just love this little stork. I think that he's so funny holding his little baby bundle. And I've made you a template. You can take a screenshot if you want, but I will link a PDF in the description box just in case it's helpful to have a printable. This is 8.5 by 5.5, and we're going to score it a 1/2 inch, 4 inch, 4.5, and 8. So here's a 1/2 inch. 4 inches, 4.5 inches, and then my scoreboard is small, so I'm going to flip it and score at a 1/2 inch again. So I have a 1/2 inch on either side, and then there's a 1/2 inch strip in the middle, and those are going to be the sides of our box. All of these will be folded as mountain folds, and it just sort of wraps around on itself to create this box. I promise these are so simple, but I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for stability and other things you might want to think about along the way. So this is our card base, and I'm going to grab my A7 dies. These are the Trinity stamps, modern embossed A7 layers, and I love them and they work perfectly here, but any A7 layering dies, or really any shape that fits in that opening, just go for it. So I am opening up my card base and I'm taking a die that measures 2.5 by 4.5 inches, and I am centering it right in one of those middle sections, one of the larger sections, and I will run that through my die cutting machine. And now I have a hole perfectly centered in the front of my card. Then I have a piece of cardstock a little bigger than that front panel. It's 3 3/4 by 5 3/4, and I took the next bigger layering die. And so when I lay this over my card base, you can see that I have some of that light blue peeking around. It's a nice decorative touch, but I'm also reinforcing and creating stability on the front of this card. So I'm adding glue only on that front panel, and I'm making sure I don't go all the way towards the inner part of that cutout because that's not going to be covered. Then I will lay this darker blue piece on top and get everything centered. Yes, I have extra cardstock, but it's easier this way, I promise. You could try to cut a hole perfectly in the center of the exact right size cardstock, but mine never seems to work out. So I will just take my scissors and cut off the extra from the top and bottom, which is pretty simple. But then I'm going to fold those 1/2 inch flaps, right? I did one already, but I'm going to fold this other one, and then I will trim right along the side there as well. I'm extra careful on the sides to make sure I'm not cutting the fold and creating a hole in the box of my card. I'm just using my scissors to clean up one little piece, and then you can do anything with this, you guys, anything. I like to decorate the background of the box before I close it up. So this is just a mini slimline die. This is from Trinity. It's called the geometric cutout. It's not going to go all the way to either side of that background. That's okay. There's like a 1/4 inch strip on either side. That actually helps the box card close a little bit better, which I love. But you could stencil something in the background. There's lots of options. I will also add some small die cuts, but you can keep this as simple or as complex as you want. Really, it's a super versatile card design, and I just think that there's a huge wow factor that's a lot of fun. When I glue this down, I am paying particular attention to make sure I have glue along that top edge where I'm going to be cutting things off. I don't want those pieces coming loose or catching on anything, but other than that, I don't worry too terribly much about getting glue on every little piece on the middle of that geometric pattern. I'm going to make a baby card, and I'm starting by using this special delivery die set, and it is so cute. It's got this little stork and a baby and the bundle. There's a hat for the stork. I am doing some simple ink blending. You could skip some of this, but I know that when I give this card out, it's going to be to someone who's really important to me. And this is a keepsake card. And so if they're going to keep it, if they're going to put it on display, I think it's worth a little extra effort. I'm going to layer on the beak and legs, and to make sure that they blend into the white stork that I've cut out, I just took a matching alcohol marker and ran it along the edges. I think in total, I spent about 5 minutes on some of those extra details. So kind of depending on what card it is, what occasion it is, you can decide if that's something that you think is important. I want to emphasize one more time that you don't have to make a baby card here, right? You can use this exact same template. This fits in an A2 envelope, and you could put the ice cream cone die on here and do a fun summer card. You could turn this and do like a landscape card, like use that same geometric background and then one of the big cut and foils, the celebrate or the thanks, right? I've done a card like that really recently that was flat, but you could turn it into a box card and maybe add some florals. There's a brand new Garden Flowers die set that is really whimsical and soft and beautiful. The Doodle Car would fit on this, you guys. I think I want to make one with the Doodle Car. Anyway, there's so many options and so many great ways to use this. So here's the baby. There are tiny little indentations for the baby's eyes, so I'm going to fill those in. There is like a diaper die that you can put on the baby, but I'm going to put him in this little bundle. And then there's a heart that debosses into that. So I'm going to use some metallic watercolor paint. And I'm going to add that first, just kind of in the middle of the heart. But I found when I was doing one earlier that I had a hard time keeping that paint from sort of flooding outside of the debossed area. So I'm going to bring in my pickup stick tool, right? And because there's extra paint, there's extra liquid in there, I will just push that very gently towards the edges, and I got a perfect fill on this one. So that was really fun, and I was very happy with that. This is a really old Trinity set called Rainbow Funshine, which I love. Oh, you guys, and I'm just stealing some clouds. I'm going to trim off the edges to make sure they're going to fit well in my card, and I can sort of stagger them. When you go to glue these down, pay very careful attention to where your score lines are. You don't want anything overlapping those score lines. I'm going to cheat away from them ever so slightly. It will just help the card close later, and it's sort of covered up when the card is open and popped up. So I'm not super worried about it being all the way up against that. All right, so there are my 3 clouds, and that's as much as I'm doing on the inside, right? There's lots of ways to step up box cards, add other layers. We're not doing that today, right? Super simple, very quick. I am folding in that back flap, the back 1/2 inch flap, and I'm going to hold that with my glue on it flat, and then I will press the front of the box card onto it. I want the front 1/2 inch flap to be going backwards. You just get a cleaner look so the seam of the box isn't on the front. I'm going to press that a couple times. I'm going to fold it both ways just to make sure that it's going to fit well in my envelope and nothing is buckling. And then I can start decorating the front of my card. I'm going to put the baby bundle on the Stork's beak before I try to put anything else together, so I can treat this as one piece. Once I have it placed where I want it, I'm going to use some mint tape to mark where the box is, so I'm not ending up with glue where I don't want it or accidentally gluing my box card shut. Folded flat, this box is 4 inches wide as opposed to a standard 4 1/4 on an A2. So I can have a little bit of overlap on that front panel. The wings, when I fold this flat, will overlap the side panels. So those are fine, but the baby's head is actually outside of the left panel, right? So when it's folded flat, it's beyond the 4 inches. As long as it doesn't go beyond a 1/4 inch, it'll still fit just fine in the envelope. I got the Stork glued down, and then I will just lift gently on the baby and add some glue to the box behind that. I like to add it to the box instead of the baby or the die cut, whatever it is, just to make sure I don't have glue where I don't want it. For a sentiment on the front, I'm using the Simply Sentimental Baby dies and stamps. So in that die set, there are a bunch of versions or fonts for the word baby and shadows to go with them. And I like this sort of bubbly, scripty one. I think it's really cute and whimsical. It goes with our Stork with the tone of the font. There is also a stamp that looks exactly the same, and it's the same size. And you can use that die set to stamp the large baby and cut it out instead if you prefer that. And then there's a whole bunch of sub-sentiments. Some of them go before, some go after. So we're going to use Welcome Baby. I just stamped it and then trimmed it out into a rectangle. I gave it a little mat, partly for stability. And then I will be very careful once again of where I'm putting my glue. This is going up in the corner. And then when I add the baby, I want it to attach to the top and the side. Every time we have die cuts that connect two sides of the box, we add stability to it. And so I am just very careful. I move slowly, I double check, I kind of use my fingers as placement guides. And then I like to reach in there for my initial press to attach everything, just to make sure I don't have glue oozing out. I have 2 layers for the back of my card. This is totally optional. I'm using the Ribbon Rosette add-on baby. And then this is so cute, you guys. This is the Little Gnome Nappers stamp set. I'm just using the sentiment here, but they're so stinking cute. These little gnomes asleep on their mushrooms. Really, really sweet. This white piece of cardstock is 3 1/8 by 5 1/8, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment on here. And then that little onesie I just cut out from some green cardstock, and I used a marker to add some little polka dots on there. I thought that was kind of fun. I will glue that up towards the top. This is going to layer onto that darker blue cardstock that's 3 1/4 by 5 1/4. I'm gluing my darker blue layer straight onto my card base. I'm just going to center it on that back panel and I'll get a nice thin border. But I'm going to use removable adhesive for the white layer. There's sometimes a lot of texture and bulk on a box card and it can be tricky to write on it just by folding the box flat. So a little removable adhesive means I can put it on there now so I don't lose it, but then I can take it off, write my message, and put it right back on when I'm ready to give it away. So that finishes up our card. We have this fun stand-up display piece. It folds flat into an A2 envelope, and I think it's super fun. Here's our second card, and she's a little bit of a chunky monkey. This is an A7, okay, so a 5 by 7, and we're going to decorate the back and the front, and we're going to do it for Father's Day. I love this. You're going to get another template and tips for putting together that ribbon rosette. That might be my new favorite die set. So you need 2 of these card bases. They're 5 1/2 by 7, and we're going to score at 3/4 of an inch from either side. So it's actually 3/4 and then 4 3/4. I'm going to do that twice. On the last card, we were able to use 5 by 7 dies to cut the hole in the front, but that doesn't really work here. They're too wide. So I'm going to use a mini slimline die. This is a 3 by 6 inch die. I'm not even going to use the pattern that the die cuts out on this card. I will save it for later. If you want something with rounded corners, you could use the mini slimline cell phone die. For my background, I'm going to use that same geometric cutout die in navy. So I used it to cut the hole in the front. I'm using it to decorate the background of this card, and I used it to decorate the background in the previous card. This might be my most used background die. Like, it's so great. So I am folding all of our 3/4 inch flaps as mountain folds, and then I am going to burnish them with my bone folder. My geometric cutout die will fit perfectly centered in the background of this card. So I'm making sure to put glue really well around the edges, and then I'll dot in some of the larger areas. But once again, it's pretty protected inside that box card. So I am not worried about getting adhesive absolutely everywhere, right? I used to. You guys, I'm getting better. To assemble the box card, I'm just going to set one of these on top of the other. I want the one with the hole in it to have the flaps pointing towards the back, so all the seams are in the back. But there's a little bowing if you use just one piece of 80-pound cardstock, which is what I'm using here. I don't have a layering die that will cut a frame slightly smaller or slightly bigger. So I just cut that exact same mini slimline die out of a piece of the same color cardstock that's slightly bigger than that front panel. So at least 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. Then I'll use my wet glue, and you can see I didn't get it lined up perfectly the first time, but the wet glue really gives me that wiggle room that I need to make sure it's in the right place. Then, just like before, I can trim off the excess. I used my scissors last time, and this time I was like, well, let's just use my trimmer. It's a little straighter. But I tell you what, I was so nervous about accidentally cutting the fold on the sides that I ended up going back to my scissors in the end. I only did part of this in my trimmer. You can see me just taking off the tiniest little slivers at a time. But now when I lay that piece on top, it's a lot sturdier. So those are the 5 by 7 box basics. Again, all the measurements will be in that printable. But I am going to decorate this for Father's Day, and I'm using this ribbon rosette. You cut 3 of this piece, and then I just use my fingernail and I kind of stick it into that deboss line, and I fold it the wrong way first, and then I fold it whichever way it needs to go for the rosette, right? So it's an accordion fold all the way down. I cut this from 65-pound cardstock because we're putting it in a box, and I do want it to fold, flattish. Anything heavier than that has quite a bit of bulk, which could be problematic. To secure this, I'm using 1/8-inch double-sided tape, but really you could use 1/4-inch double-sided tape, or in a minute here, I'm going to tell you what I saw Carrie Rhodes do that I think is brilliant and probably easier than what I'm doing. I'm going to take the backing off of that paper and then accordion fold and press everything firmly. Then I'm sticking my wet glue in there. Because this is a display piece, I want to make sure it's going to last. My dad still has handmade things I gave him as a child in his office. So I'm thinking about that while I'm making this, right? I'm adding a little glue just to make sure everything will hold together for the long term. I'm folding up all 3 of these pieces. On the 3rd one, I get smart and I add my glue before I fold. But again, I think just using a whiter tape would have helped. But the next time I made this, the other thing that was really helpful was to glue together the little ends of these 3 pieces before I started accordion folding, right? So I would do this step right now. I would do that first. When I watched Carrie Rhodes make hers, she glued those ends together, accordion folded everything, and then used the die, that circle die that I have in navy on the right, to just stick a piece of adhesive in the middle, a circle of adhesive, and it held the whole thing together without having to sort of glue all the different layers and all the different steps. I'm an over adheser, so I would probably still do the strip of double-sided tape, but I will definitely add a circle of double-sided adhesive in the middle for all of my future cards. I just thought that was so, so brilliant. Carrie's amazing. Okay, so back to our rosette. I am just securing the last 2 ends of this rosette. And then I want to show you what it's like to use a heavier weight cardstock, right? So here's 65-pound. This white one is 100-pound, and it's almost twice as thick by the time that it's done. Before I add the center pieces that I have die cut out, I added a circle of foam. It's about 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch, just to help fill in a little bit of that space so it's a little sturdier. And then I can glue that gold circle with the decorative edge right over the top. This is the Ribbon Rosette add-on Mom. You can make the word Mom. Wow, you've got this number 1. There's a Mom boss that you can sort of cut and pop into the center, which I love. But I'm just going to repurpose the number 1. I have cut it from that same matte gold cardstock that I have my larger circle out of, and then parts of my ribbon. I like to assemble things onto the navy piece, the smaller circle first, and then I can add it onto the middle. It just helps my eye to get everything centered. I'm using wet glue through pretty much all of this. I find that wet glue holds longer than like a tape runner. And if I want the card to last, this adds a little bit of sturdiness and then longevity for the card. I am adding 2 layers of gold banner onto that same light brown cardstock. Remember, that brown is 65 pounds. So I definitely wanted this extra layer. It's optional. You could skip that, but I think that it really helps to add that stability. To figure out where I want the ribbon, I have the top of the box on there, right? I want to know what I'm going to be able to see when the box is on display. And then I'm going to open it back up, and I have a sticky mat, right? That is like a low tack something. And I'm putting it in the bottom left-hand corner of that center panel. I'll pick it up, add glue onto the ends of the ribbon, and then I can lay it right back down into that bottom left-hand corner, and I know it will be placed perfectly. You could eyeball this, but some days I don't have that in me. And this is just, for me, a little more foolproof when I'm in the middle of a card that has a lot of moving parts. To assemble my box, I'm going to add glue onto one of the front panels, the back of it. And then I'm going to attach that to the flap from the back panel. I want the seams in the back, right? So I'm being really careful to make sure that the short flaps on the front panel are on the outside of the box. Then I'm going to fold this other back flap in towards the card. Again, just emphasizing you really, really, really want that front flap facing towards the back. Then I will press everything flat. You can see it here. I will pick it up, add my glue onto the back flap, the outside of the back flap, hold that flat, and then I'll press the front of the card closed. It is so, so important when you are attaching your flaps that you're doing it while the box is flat. Sometimes it can look great open, but if you haven't been folding it flat all along as you're gluing your box together, you might go to fold it flat in the end and it's not lined up quite right and it doesn't fold flat and it won't fit in the envelope, and that can be really frustrating. This is the Modern Embossed alphabet, and I have cut out the word Dad, and then I also cut out some toolbox from the new Toolbox gift card holder die set. I'm not making the toolbox today, but you guys, it's so cute. It's just super awesome. It would be great for my father-in-law, but my dad doesn't know how to fix anything that requires more than like duct tape. So if somebody wants to make like a duct tape die, that would be amazing. For the dad, at first I thought I was just going to use this fog cardstock, but it didn't stand out enough. So I am also putting a layer of that matte gold cardstock on there with a drop shadow, right? It's the exact same die, but I've just layered it so that it's sort of down and to the right ever so slightly. It's really easy with this die set because there's a little embossed line around the letters, and I am just lining it up with that embossed line. I laid everything out on the box just to make sure I have my placement, and I'm going to start with the bottom left corner, right? I'll put that D on there, and then I'm going to put the second D on with the A just kind of sitting there, because I find it easier to center the A than to try to get the exact same spacing from D to A and then A to D, if that makes sense. Again, I like to use my fingers and kind of press that to the panel, right? I slide my fingers inside the box first, and then later I will sort of press everything flat to make sure it's got really good adhesion, but I want to make sure there isn't any glue oozing out. This saw is ever so slightly a problem. There is like 1/8 of an inch of the top handle of the side, just pointed to it, hanging over the top of the box card. It is not a big deal if I'm hand delivering and I don't want it in an envelope. This fits in an envelope, but that little piece is very delicate and I have to be super careful with it. I have 2 layers of cardstock for the back of my card. The gold piece is 3 1/4 by 6 1/4, and I'm just going to go ahead and glue that one straight onto my card. Then I can work on decorating the white piece that's 3 by 6, and I will eventually add that with removable adhesive. Once again, the rosette inside this box card is particularly bulky, so I don't want to have to try to write a message over the top of that. I know it would not go very well. So here is my white piece of cardstock, and I am using the Insider Sentiments Valentine's Day set. You guys, I was really proud of myself for getting this set out and finding a way to extend its use. I really love this sentiment as well. It says you have an amazing heart and a kind soul, and I am just stamping that on the bottom left hand edge, and it's going sideways, and I love that. Something just a little bit different. And then this is the Simply Sentimental Hugs. I used the Simply Sentimental Baby on the first card. This is the same idea. So I cut the shadow die and the word die of Hugs out from some scrap cardstock. That's the gray piece, and I temporarily taped it onto my white cardstock for placement. I cut out the word Hugs in that same 65-pound brown cardstock, and I put some Rip and Stick sheet on the back. It's a double-sided adhesive sheet from Trinity, and I love how it makes these word dies that have individual letters so quick and easy to use. I sort of place them in there gently, and then once everything's in, I press firmly and I can remove that shadow. Honestly, I'm looking at it in editing and I really like that gray shadow. I might go back and add it if it will fit with our stamped sub-sentiment. So this is going to say Hugs Incoming, and I just think that that is super fun. So now I have my panel. It is ready for a greeting, like a handwritten something. I will temporarily add it on there so that I don't lose it. I know I only have to keep track of this for like a month, but still, you have no idea how easily I can lose things. Those measurements give me a nice little 1/8" border all the way around. I'm bringing in the colors from the front of the card. You guys, this is hands down the coolest Father's Day card I have ever made. And I love that it stands up on display. I know that my husband's gonna take this to work. And I just think it's super fun. So here's one more look at the 2 box cards we made for today. Remember, you can make a box card using any theme you want, any products you want. I just thought that these were 2 really special occasions, and I love how these turned out. If you want all the measurements, you can screenshot it from the video, or I'll link a PDF in the description box below. Thank you all so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.